Welcome to Washington Today for Monday, November 3rd, 2025. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thank you for joining us. It's day 34 of the federal government shutdown, and this afternoon the Trump administration said it will provide half benefits to Americans who receive federal food assistance. That after states filed lawsuits against the White House to fully fund SNAP with an emergency reserve. Meanwhile, members of both parties are looking for a way out of the shutdown after weeks of minimal progress. That includes a group of Democratic senators and a bipartisan group of House members. House and Senate leadership talked to reporters today. We'll play for you what they said. And one day more until Election Day 2025 and voters choosing new governors in Virginia and New Jersey, a new mayor in New York City, and new congressional districts in California. We'll talk about it all with National Journal Hotline editor Kirk Bado coming up. We start here in Washington where the Senate came in at 3 p.m. Here's what Republican leader John Thune had to say.
As the senior Democrat from Virginia said just last year, and I quote, "Shutdowns aren't victimless crimes," end quote. And after 5 weeks, Mr. President, the victims of the Democrat shutdown are starting to pile up. Military families have turned to food banks in significant numbers. And they're not the only ones. Food banks in this area and around the country have seen an influx of federal workers who are missing paychecks due to the shutdown. And things are set to get much worse with SNAP running on limited emergency funds and its future uncertain. Thanks to Democrats, millions more Americans, millions, Mr. President, are now at risk of going hungry. And yet the Democrat shutdown marches on. And of course, letting Americans go hungry is just the beginning. Thanks to Democrats, Head Start programs are beginning to close. Housing assistance programs are at risk. Seniors and people in rural areas can't access telehealth services. National Guard training is on hold. Veterans programs are on pause. I'm sorry to say I could go on. Actually, I could go on for a while. Shutdowns have consequences, and the pain is being felt around the country. Mr. President, last week it seemed that Democrats were beginning to acknowledge that their shutdown is having consequences. We even heard Democrats express concern that Americans were suffering. But when they were given the chance to end all of that suffering, the vast majority of Democrats in this body were perfectly willing to prolong the shutdown and the American people's pain. The vast majority of Democrats voted once again against a clean continuing resolution, the only bill on offer that could end all this suffering literally in a matter of hours. It is the only bill in the Senate that would fix every single issue I just mentioned.
Part of Senate Republican leader John Thune's Leader Time remarks. Here's what Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer had to say.
So, Mr. President, last Friday, the courts spoke loudly. They spoke clearly. Donald Trump cannot block SNAP benefits and treat hungry Americans as political pawns. The stories from the weekend were shameful, sickening. People overwhelming food banks, handing out groceries in lieu of Halloween candy, teachers paying out of pocket to give their students extra food. Across America, appalling scenes were seen of people worried they wouldn't be able to feed their families and even themselves. This is appalling, and the courts did the right thing to step in to follow the law. But the Trump administration still refuses to fully comply. A few hours ago, the administration announced that it will provide only partial SNAP benefits to 42 million Americans facing food insecurity, even though the courts affirmed that the USDA has the transfer authority to ensure everyone can receive full benefits. Everyone can get full benefits. The only person standing in the way is Donald Trump. Donald Trump. Even after the courts have spoken, The administration continues to use kids, seniors, disabled Americans, and working parents as political pawns, dangling the threat of hunger over their heads. Providing partial benefits is not enough, is not compliant with the law, and it's particularly cruel of Trump with the Thanksgiving season around the corner. Let me say this: providing partial SNAP benefits is a floor and cannot be a ceiling. Let me repeat: providing partial SNAP benefits is a floor, not a ceiling. The administration must do more, and the courts should do everything they can to force this administration, cruel as it may be, manipulating hungry people as it is doing. The courts must make sure that full benefits are restored. Only Trump is standing in the way.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer now on those partial SNAP benefits. NPR.org writing today, the Trump administration says it will restart SNAP food benefits, but it will pay out only half the amount people normally get. The administration says it will use money from an Agriculture Department contingency fund. The $5 billion in that fund falls well short of the full cost of SNAP benefits, which is $8 billion each month. The decision comes after two federal judges ruled that freezing payments for the country's biggest anti-hunger program is unlawful, even as the money ran out this weekend for the 42 million people who rely on SNAP to put food on the table. The government's response is part of the case in Rhode Island, that from NPR.org. And this from the Hill's Alex Bolton: at least 8 moderate Senate Democrats are meeting in hopes of finding a deal to end the month-long government shutdown, but sources familiar with the closely held conversations say they will need strong assurances from the GOP before voting to reopen the government. The 8 Democrats include Senators Jeanne Shaheen and Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire, John Ossoff of Georgia, Gary Peters and Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan, Mark Kelly of Arizona, Peter Welch of Vermont, and Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin. The group huddled in the Capitol basement during votes Thursday in an attempt to put themselves in a position to end the shutdown before the scheduled Veterans Day recess. That from the Hill's Alex Bolton. Now, over on the House side, Speaker Mike Johnson held his daily press conference this morning. He was asked if House Republicans have been talking about a new continuing resolution expiration date, with the current date of November 21st approaching.
We're very mindful of the calendar. We're very frustrated by that. It's part of the reason we're so angry about this, because they're eating up the clock, and the Democrats know how much more we have to do here this year. But we cannot do it if the government's not opened and not serving the people. And so this is a very important matter. It's something that we're giving all of our attention to. Our leaders will go and meet on the calendar right now. We watch it every day. But the simplest way to get all these issues resolved, health care, everything else, to get it all finished up for the year, is for them to reopen the government and make sure people are not hurting, instead of Democrats over here playing political games to cover their own backside. I hope the election tomorrow is a change, a sea change in all this. I hope that after everybody votes and they go in their room and they make the calculation that, well, maybe we won't have to hold that line anymore. Maybe they won't punish us. Maybe it won't affect turnout in our states in these elections. Maybe after tomorrow they'll come to their common senses again and do the right thing. We certainly pray that is true, and Republicans will be on the job every single day, serving our constituents, helping guide them through the chaos that the Democrat shutdown has created, and praying that they do the right thing and stop making the American people suffer because of this nonsense.
Speaker Johnson was also asked about President Trump's comments in last night's 60 Minutes interview that he's in favor of abolishing the Senate filibuster.
So I talked to the president multiple times over the weekend, I mentioned, and of course the filibuster came up. This is a Senate matter. It has nothing to do with the House. Everybody wants to know what my opinion is. I mean, my opinion is irrelevant. I understand desperate times call for desperate measures. I also understand that traditionally we've seen that as an important safeguard. I mean, I obviously shared my thoughts with the president on that. As much as I have wanted to blow up the filibuster sometime as a House member when we were not getting what we wanted done in our agenda, I hear my Senate Republican colleagues, some of the most conservative people in Congress, who say it's an important safeguard. It prevents us. It holds us back from the Democrats' worst impulses. What would the Democrats do if they had no filibuster impediment, no speed bump at all? They've already told us They would pack the Supreme Court. You'd go from 9 to 13 or 15 or 17 or however many liberals they can pack on the court. You would have D.C. and Puerto Rico be made into states, which would give 4 additional Democrat senators there in the count and make us a permanent minority. I guess that would be their calculation. You would see massive restriction of the Second Amendment rights. You'd see them federalize elections so they could take over and manipulate things in the red states. I mean, there's a lot of abuses that could come. And so that's the caveat. That's what they're working through. And I speak frankly and honestly with the president, and he's very passionate about this. We're all very passionate. I think what you see in this debate we're having on our own side is a reflection of the anger that we feel, the real desperation that we feel, because we want the government to be reopened. We want to serve the American people as best we can. And any hindrance to that is something that everybody's looking at very carefully. Again, not a House issue. It's a Senate issue, and we'll see how that's resolved.
House Speaker Mike Johnson this morning at the Capitol. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries also talked to reporters this afternoon, and federal food assistance was on his mind.
It's extraordinary that Donald Trump, his administration, and corrupt Republicans on Capitol Hill are voluntarily and intentionally withholding SNAP benefits from 42 million Americans who are at risk of going hungry. This includes 16 million children. This is an intentional decision not to pay full benefits because the money exists in a contingency fund to ensure that not a single American, not a single child, not a single veteran, not a single senior goes hungry. This irresponsible behavior is the reason why the overwhelming majority of the American people are very clear that under Republican control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, the country is moving in the wrong direction. Donald Trump's disapproval ratings are in the toilet. The American people know that all of the promises that were made to lower the high cost of living have not been kept. Costs aren't going down, they're going up. The situation is an ever-occurring disaster, which is why we're going to see big victories tomorrow by Democrats across the country.
Leader Jeffries was also asked about the Epstein files.
Leader Jeffries, I guess on the Epstein files, which still have not been released, on a personal note, how does it feel to work with so many grown adults who have been obstructing the release of these Epstein files and, in effect, protecting pedophiles?
Well, the Trump administration and Mike Johnson are running a pedophile protection program. That's what they've been doing. And that's the reason why they refused to swear in Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva. For weeks now, she was elected in late September decisively. And Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva still hasn't been sworn in because she'll become the 218th vote on an up or down piece of legislation that will require the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files. And yet week after week after week have gone by and Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva is unable to serve 800,000 plus people in the state of Arizona, all because of the pedophile protection program being run by Mike Johnson and House Republicans at the direction of their boss, Donald J. Trump.
House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries at the Capitol. And this from Punchbowl News Congress reporter Laura Weiss. Democratic Representatives Tom Suozzi of New York and Josh Gottheimer of Florida, along with Republicans Don Bacon of Nebraska and Jeff Hurd of Colorado, have released a set of principles for an extension of enhanced health care tax credits. That's the center of Democratic opposition to the Republicans' continuing resolution. Those principles include several reforms, including income caps and a 2-year extension of the tax credits. Now, as the shutdown moves into its 35th day, it ties the record for the longest in U.S. history. That happened in the first Trump administration from December 22nd, 2018 to January 25th, 2019. Earlier this morning on Washington Journal, Notice congressional reporter Daniela Diaz talked about some important dates to watch for coming up.
Well, to me, the most important date has just passed, and that was November 1st. That was on Saturday. That is when open enrollment for healthcare started, and what Democrats were going to say were Americans seeing their premiums go up, and would possibly be an inflection point in all of this as they see why Democrats were fighting against the stopgap measure that Republicans put on the floor from the very beginning. Also, SNAP benefits. I've heard that from senators all last week. That is a major concern for them because they're not being funded, and it started on November 1st as well. So we're going to feel the pressure that they're probably got from their home states when they come back today. They're flying in today. Senate votes at 5:30, as they always are usually
flying
on
in
Mondays.
today if flights are on time, I guess.
If their flights are on time. Look, last time there was a shutdown and it lasted as long as it did, it was TSA workers calling out because they weren't getting paid. That really caused a lot of pressure for Congress to figure this out. That could happen again.
By the way, asked Daniel about President Trump possibly coming to Capitol Hill and inserting himself. Do Republicans want that? Do Republican senators want President Trump up here and to take a more active role? Or are they happy with the process that you started this conversation talking about, the rank and file discussions moving to perhaps something more?
John, if you ask Democrats whether President Donald Trump should be part of this, they say yes, because they say Republicans are not going to do anything to fund this government without a sign-off from President Donald Trump. Do Republicans want President Donald Trump in this? Probably not, because of who we know as President Donald Trump and how these negotiations have gone over the past couple of weeks. But it's probably going to require him okaying whatever Republican leaders agree with when it comes to whatever rank and file does negotiate should this shutdown end anytime soon.
Notice congressional reporter Daniela Diaz on this morning's Washington Journal. You can see all of that segment and get all of our coverage as the government shutdown moves into its record-tying 35th day at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now app. You're listening to Washington Today.
The book is called Breakneck: China's Quest to Engineer the Future. Author Dan Wang was born in China in 1992. His parents moved to Canada when he was 7. In 2014, he graduated from the University of Rochester in New York. Then in 2018, Dan Wang went to live in China until he returned to the U.S. in 2023. He then went to the offices of the Yale Law School and wrote about his comparison of China and the United States. He writes in his intro, quote, "A strain of materialism, often crass, runs through both countries, sometimes producing variations of successful entrepreneurs, sometimes creating displays of extraordinary tastelessness, but overall contributing to a spirit of vigorous competition."
Author Dan Wang with his book Breakneck: China's Quest to Engineer the Future, on this episode of Book Notes Plus with our host Brian Lamb. Book Notes Plus is available wherever you get your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now app.
Welcome back to Washington Today. Election 2025 is tomorrow, and this from USA Today. The off-year races in Virginia, New Jersey, California, New York City, and elsewhere are seen as key early barometers of how voters are feeling about President Trump and the Democratic Party as it fights his aggressive agenda. The president has loomed large over the contests, featuring in ads and as frequent topic in debates as Democrats blast his record and Republicans embrace it. Trump is paying close attention, hyping GOP candidates on social media and taking aim at their opponents. That from USA Today. And from Saturday, here's Virginia Republican governor's candidate Winsome Earle-Sears at a rally in Purcellville.
You know, this really is serious. When I look around and I see all of you and I think there's so many countries that we can't do this. We can't do this. And Jason will tell you that his mom, being from Cuba, couldn't do this. And in so many countries, there was a time in the country that I was born in, we couldn't do it either. Not this and then go home and go to sleep. No, because you wondered who would be coming. And so we must never lose this. There are politicians, and I'm finishing up, there are politicians who keep fighting the Civil War. And they like us to be against each other because then they ride in on their horse and they're going to save us. But we don't need saving. No, we need them to get out of our way so that we can do what we need to do. And that is make Virginia the best place to live and work and raise a family. We need these politicians to stop turning us against each other. We don't need that. We want our children to grow up together, to love each other. We don't need that kind of politics anymore. We've seen enough violence. We've seen enough of that nonsense. My opponent, she's for nonsense. And I'm for common sense that works. Less taxes, safety, more jobs.
And her opponent, Democrat Abigail Spanberger, spoke to supporters early this morning in Richmond.
The exciting thing is that tomorrow we get to set an example for the rest of the country. Tomorrow, when people are wondering what happens, when people have the opportunity to go to the polling places, when people have the opportunity to make their voices heard by casting their ballot, by voting, what is it that we do here in Virginia? And the answer is we flip some seats. The answer is we vote for people who are committed to making the change and the progress that we know is important in our Commonwealth. The answer is that we stand up against the chaos and the division that we see coming out of this administration, and we commit to making changes here on the ground that will steady Virginia. And that all across Virginia, where people are talking about the real challenges of everyday life, whether it's affordability, your rent going up, food prices going up, chaotic job markets for those headed into the workforce. In Virginia, we need a governor who will stand up against the chaos and endeavor to create stability, steadiness, and job growth here on the ground. And I'm excited about this moment because we have the opportunity to show the rest of the country what it is that we do.
Abigail Spanberger, the Democratic nominee for Virginia governor, campaigning today at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond. Election Day 2025 is Tuesday, November 4th, and joining us now to talk about that race in Virginia and the others that everyone is watching, Kirk Bado, editor of The Hotline, a daily political newsletter. Thanks so much for being with us. So let's start in Virginia, governor's race, also the attorney general's race.
So yes, Virginia is kind of the marquee race that we'll be watching Tuesday night, along with the governor's race in New Jersey. Virginia, though, it's been a little bit of a sleeper, at least at the top of the ticket. Former Democratic Rep Abigail Spanberger is the clear favorite to replace term-limited Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin, because the Republican nominee, Winsome Earle-Sears, has just really struggled to excite the Republican base and at the same time failed to attract more independent-minded voters as well. She's tried lodging some more cultural war attacks against Spanberger in the closing months, focusing a lot on transgender policy issues. But between the cuts to the federal workforce under the Trump administration, coupled with the government shutdown right now, Virginia has a ton of federal workers. It looks like Spanberger is the clear favorite here.
And just staying in Virginia, the attorney general's race, not normally a race that gets national attention, but this one did.
No, absolutely. And Virginia, and of all the races on the ticket, statewide at least, in Virginia, between the governor's race, lieutenant governor's race, and the AG race, the AG race is going to be the most competitive. Now, this blew up on the national radar because of a big story from National Review, which unearthed old text messages between Jay Jones, the Democratic nominee, and a Republican state lawmaker who was one of his friends. And in these texts, he was threatening violence against the Republican leader of the General Assembly, saying something to the effect of, if Hitler or some of these other dictators were alive and this Republican leader were in a room and he only had 2 bullets, he would shoot him twice. It was really scandalous stuff that the lawmaker at the other end of these text messages was like, hey, man, what are you doing here? And those messages have blown up on the campaign trail. They're in every single ad that you see right now from Jason Mioris, who's the incumbent Republican attorney general right now, and it's really upended the race. Democrats, like we said earlier, are on a little bit of a glide path to in the governor's race. I would say the Democrats are also favored in lieutenant governor's race, but all the polling we've seen of the AG race has it really close. I would predict that if Spanberger wanted to drag Jay Jones across the finish line, she would probably need to win by more than 10 points or so to overcome the difference in polling we're seeing. And just to be clear here, Spanberger has condemned these text messages when they came out. Every other Democrat in the state has as well. They've stopped short of calling for Jay Jones to withdraw from the race, and Jones has continued to soldier on. So that's probably going to be the most competitive race we'll be watching on Tuesday night.
And you mentioned governor's race in New Jersey as well. That one's a little bit closer.
It is, and it's interesting because that one in New Jersey, that's the state where Trump gained the most between 2020 and 2024, in large part because of his gains with Latino voters in several counties up outside of New York, specifically Passaic County and Hudson County, which have a majority of a plurality, at least, of Hispanic voters. Now, Mikey Sherrill, the Democratic nominee there, is a member of Congress. She's running against the Republican Jet Schitterelli, and this is his third time running for governor. He came closer than expected 4 years ago in Phil Murphy's reelection campaign. I believe Murphy only won by about 3 points. So that closer than expected race 4 years ago, coupled with Trump's big gains in New Jersey last year, have Democrats sweating this out a little bit. Mikey Sherrill still leading in the polls that we've seen so far, but of the two, Virginia and New Jersey is definitely going to be closer and definitely going to be a little bit more competitive.
Another election that's being closely watched is the Prop 50 ballot initiative in California dealing with congressional redistricting. How is that looking? About a month and a half ago, when this whole redistricting arms race started in Texas, and then California responded in kind. Now, California, unlike Texas, they have to pass a constitutional referendum in order to change the lines here. And if you would have asked me when this all started a month and a half ago, what are the prospects of a majority of California voters supporting basically a Democratic gerrymander, I would probably put the odds a slight favorite that this is going to fail. However, Gavin Newsom has really blown this out of the water. He's been he's out fundraised all his opponents here to the point where in the closing weeks, he's asked donors to direct their money elsewhere, and the polling's completely flipped. It looks like that Prop 50 is going to pass, and it might pass with larger margins than Kamala Harris carried the state last year. It's a huge win for Democrats, huge win for Gavin Newsom. It's a big loss for Republicans. They promised early on, Kevin McCarthy, the former speaker, said that he was going to spend $100 million to oppose this referendum, and his group that he has out there running ads ended up spending less than $7 million. I mean, it's a huge egg on the face for Republicans. We're talking with Kirk Bado from the Hotline. And back to the East Coast, one more race to talk about there, New York City mayoral contest. Everyone's been saying for months that Zohran Mamdani is going to take this. Anything changing in the polls?
Not really. It does seem like Mamdani is going to win here. We've gotten some early voting data out that shows that there's a huge jump in voters under 40 voting early. Those are Mamdani's key coalition there, the ones that are most excited about him, about the 30-year-old state assemblyman. I would be shocked if this was anything less than a 10-point victory for Mamdani. And I think what we overlook here is that this is also going to be an end to the Cuomo political dynasty as well. And given some of Andrew Cuomo's rhetoric in the closing weeks here, it's a little bit of a disappointing end for a real storied political family up in New York.
Andrew Cuomo has been saying that the Republican nominee in the race, Curtis Sliwa, is a spoiler. Do the polls show anything about that?
It's hard to say who's the spoiler here. I mean, Curtis Sliwa is the Republican nominee here. Andrew Cuomo, after losing the Democratic primary, decided to run as an independent. And even in any of these head-to-head polls that we see between either Cuomo or Curtis Sliwa, they're pretty much even here. They're both losing to Mamdani heavily in one-on-one polling, and no one seems to have a real advantage here. If anyone is trying to be a spoiler, I would almost say it's Cuomo who decided to soldier ahead with this independent bid after voters in New York pretty roundly rejected him in the primary.
And a final question. You write at nationaljournal.com/hotline about President Trump. He and his vast resources are staying on the sidelines in the waning weeks of the off-year elections. What has been the White House role?
Well, that's the thing that's kind of confounded me, and what I wanted to write about is that Trump's vast political apparatus is like the Death Star. It's the most powerful weapon in the political universe. It has about $500 million that Trump and his allies can kind of spend at will here to support whatever candidates or political causes they want. And it's largely kept the powder dry. We mentioned earlier in Prop 50 in California, Republicans got vastly outspent there, and now their redraw in Texas, where Texas drew 5 seats to favor Republicans, is going to be neutralized because of this ballot referendum in California, which is going to net Democrats 5 seats. Republicans had an opportunity to stop it. Trump had an opportunity to spend money and run ads against it, but he chose not to. And then in Virginia, Trump has not endorsed Winsome Earl Sears because of a slight that she gave him in, I believe, 2021, 2022, where she said that the party needs to move past him. And so he's kept his base from fully embracing her. In New Jersey, he also could have run a lot of political ads, but the Democrats are outspending Republicans in New Jersey by about 2-1. That's a state where, because of his gains with Latino voters, either maybe an appearance from Trump or even just get out the vote efforts would have gone a long way. Now, his operation is investing in some last-minute get out the vote stuff on Monday and Tuesday. But the Republican strategist that we talked to said it might be too little too late. And this is a pattern for Trump where if he is not on the ballot, he doesn't do a whole lot to help Republicans who are up for election.
Kirk Bado, editor of The Hotline. You can follow him on X at Kirk_Bado. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And from calmatters.org, a day before voting ends for Proposition 50, California voters appear poised to approve Governor Gavin Newsom's plan to gerrymander the state's congressional districts in Democrats' favor. Recent opinion polls show strong support for the yes side. Newsom's campaign is flooding the airwaves with star-studded advertisements and drowning out its opponent's faint final pitch to voters. If approved, the measure would temporarily suspend California's current congressional maps, which were drawn by an independent citizens commission, and replace them through 2030 with districts drawn by Democratic insiders. That from calmatters.org. Earlier today in San Francisco, Governor Newsom held a rally supporting Proposition 50. One of the speakers was Dolores Huerta, co-founder of the National Farm Workers Association.
With Proposition 50, we're going to make sure that we have a Congress that puts the working people first and not the billionaires. So we don't need to have any golden arches in Washington, D.C. They don't need to have a golden ballroom. We don't need any of that. But we have to say that the gold standard is democracy. And with Proposition 50 passing, we are going to make sure that we have a Congress that is going to use our tax dollars the way that they should be spent for services, for housing, for medical care, for education, all of the things that we need, and that our money will not go again to the billionaires, but stay with the people of the United States, okay?
Governor Newsom also spoke to supporters.
You saw today, Donald Trump one-upped himself. Historic president. Historically unpopular president. The most unpopular since his first term. He's underwater in every key category. He knows he's going to lose the midterm elections, period, full stop. That's why he made the call to Greg Abbott saying he's entitled to 5 seats. That's why he sent J.D. Vance to Indiana. That's why he moved them to make the decision they did in Missouri. That's why they moved in North Carolina. These guys are not screwing around. But I'll end on this. They did not expect California. They did not expect all of you. They thought we were going to write an op-ed, have a candlelight visual, maybe do a rally, They poked the bear, and the bear is poking back, and we're going to get out there and win and send a powerful message, not only to the people of the state of California, but to people all over the United States of America by going out in record numbers. Yes, on 50. Thank you guys very, very much.
California Governor Gavin Newsom, before him, National Farm Workers Association co-founder Dolores Huerta in San Francisco this morning. Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook had her first policy speech today since President Trump tried to remove her from office. She spoke at the Brookings Institution.
But before I answer your questions, I would like to briefly address an issue that may be on some of your minds. As many of you know, I am involved in an ongoing legal case. There are a number of people in this room and in this building who have reached out and been supportive in many ways. I am beyond grateful for this support. And multiple briefs filed by my very skilled legal team, questions related to this case and its potential impact on the Federal Reserve have been addressed at length. Because the case is ongoing, it would be inappropriate for me to comment further today. I can say that it is the honor of my life to serve on the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. I will continue to carry out my sworn duties on behalf of the American people.
And from CNBC, Lisa Cook said at today's event she supports the Fed's interest rate reduction and indicated she would be open to more. She also said that President Trump's tariffs have not fully made their way through the economy, but she said the most likely outcome is a one-time increase in prices, not likely to continue to increase inflation over the longer term. You can see her entire discussion at Brookings today at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now app. Finally, on this day, 77 years ago, one of the most famous mistakes in media history. The Chicago Tribune famously declared Dewey defeats Truman. History.com writes in a now famous photograph taken in the early morning hours after the election in 1948, a beaming and bemused President Truman was shown holding aloft the Chicago Tribune issue that had wrongly predicted his political downfall. Many of America's major newspapers had predicted a Dewey victory early on in the campaign. A New York Times article editorialized that if Truman is nominated, he will be forced to wage the loneliest campaign in recent history. Perhaps not surprisingly then, Truman chose not to use the press as a vehicle for getting his message across. Instead, in July 1948, he embarked on an ambitious 22,000-mile whistle-stop railroad and automobile campaign tour. That about the 1948 election from History.com. And from the C-SPAN video library, here's part of a newsreel on the election from the U.S. Information Service.
Election night as the returns pour into radio headquarters and are broadcast to the nation. World interest is illustrated by international radio. The result is a surprise upset. President Truman is elected. The defeated candidate accepts it in the basic spirit of a democratic nation.
I've sent the following wire to President Truman. My heartiest congratulations to you on your election and every good wish for a successful administration. I urge all Americans to unite behind you in support of every effort to keep our nation strong and free and to establish peace in the world.
The triumphal reception in Washington, where huge crowds gather to greet the return of President Truman and Vice President-elect Barkley. This is a proper tribute to the fighting campaign waged and won by Harry S. Truman, the people's choice as their leader for the next 4 years.
Coverage of the 1948 election from the U.S. Information Service. History.com continues to write about the 1948 election. President Truman's eventual success in the election has been largely attributed to this direct interaction with the public and his appeal to the common voters as the political underdog. And tomorrow night, you can get our coverage of the 2025 election, including the New York City's mayor's race, governor's races in New Jersey and Virginia, and Proposition 50 in California. We'll have all the results and all the speeches starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Time here on C-SPAN Radio, on C-SPAN, cspan.org, and C-SPAN Now. That's also where you can find this program as a podcast. It's also on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And for more on the stories that are shaping Washington every day, get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal, our live forum inviting you to discuss the latest issues in government, politics, and public policy, from Washington to across the country. Coming up Tuesday morning, we'll talk about tomorrow's upcoming elections, starting with the Virginia governor's race with Andrew Kane, politics editor for the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Then a look at the New Jersey governor's race with New Jersey Globe editor David Wildstein. And we'll talk about New York City's mayoral race with Spectrum News New York One anchor Pat Kiernan. Also, Cal Matters politics reporter Maya Miller on California's Proposition 50. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join in the conversation live at 7 Eastern Tuesday morning on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or online at cspan.org.